I'd like to thank the event planners. I'd like to thank everyone for having me tonight. I'd like to thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank the janitors for cleaning up before we got here. Hey, Doug, you look great in that suit. Janice, I haven't seen you in years. I love your hat. I just want to thank everybody for having me today. Okay, you get where I'm going with this, don't you? Have you ever been at a speech where somebody stood up and thanked the entire world as if it's an acceptance speech for an award, but they're supposed to give a speech? Well, today we're going to talk about how to start your presentation. The first 30 seconds of a speech are probably the most important part because that's when your audience is judging you. First of all, you get on stage, they're looking at what you're wearing, how you hold yourself, but the first 30 seconds of what you say really matters. How are you doing that? What's the best way to win over an audience? What's the perfect way in order to make it so that they will listen to you for the whole time? Because if you don't set it up properly, you're going to have to try to win them back for the next hour of your speech. So my name is Jason Hewlett. I am a Hall of Fame speaker, and that does not necessarily mean I do this perfect every time. I have tried so many different ways to start a presentation. I have crashed and burned in many situations, and that's why I want to give you some of the quickest ways to leapfrog over having gone through that myself, so you don't have to as well. Now, there are some great ways to start a presentation. One of the best ways I would say to start is to engage with a story. When you start with a story, people are with you right away because you just take them right into it. Unfortunately, like I started this video, too many thank yous happens way too often. It's okay to start with a joke or an anecdote or something that you noticed. In fact, just the other day, I was introduced to stage by a guy who was actually very funny. He was the owner of the company, and he stood up before introducing me and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, today our speaker is a brain surgeon. He has been to the moon. He has worked for NASA." And then he said, "I'm just joking." And I was like, okay, I have to address that. I can't just stand up there and act like it didn't happen. So I stood up and I just said, "Hey, thank you very much for having me. I did not know that I was a brain surgeon or I had been to the moon." And that connected me with the audience real quick. And then I could go into my presentation. But we have to address that if it happens. It doesn't happen every time though. You could take a big risk and joke about something in the venue or with the audience. Sometimes it'll go over and other times it may not. You could share a story, like I said, by starting with the story about how you got there, how the drive was, maybe a story about something in your life that really would engage the people, right? There are plenty of ways to go about this, but sometimes we have to also acknowledge what's happening in the room. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with the governor of a wonderful state in our country. Now, after the governor spoke, what was interesting is instead of walking off stage and back behind the stage, the governor, unfortunately, came straight down and sat in the front row of the audience. Well, I know governors, and I know that those types of people are very busy. I did not expect for him to think that he had to sit and listen to my whole speech. And so when I was introduced, because I was next, the MC introduced me and I came right up on stage, and instead of going into my story, here's what I did. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to acknowledge that your governor is on the front row. And I know that he is extra busy. If we could give him a round of applause as he exits." You should have seen his face. He went like this. "Thank you." And then he got up and walked out with his team. They didn't know how to get out of there. So I had to give him an out because unfortunately the MC hadn't. And so there are different ways in which you can be gracious and that you can be that type of person when you get on the stage. But then I rolled right into a story, which is where we were starting at, that I had a great drive on my way to their venue. It took me 2 hours to get there, and I made fun of certain things that only that audience would know about certain gas stations, certain billboards, stops along the way, got them all laughing about the story to get there, and then I could begin my speech. Another great way I like to acknowledge the audience outside of just starting with the story would be to say, "I'm honored to speak to the leaders in this room, and I know that you're leaders. What we're speaking about today is your leadership promise, and how your leadership promise is to amplify and magnify your own signature moves and your voice as a leader. Now I've engaged them enough to think, oh, I wonder what mine is. And then we can go into that portion. But I do like to acknowledge sometimes that we have certain people in the room that we need to make sure that I realize how important they are, and then we can roll into the speech. If you do start with the story, I would recommend you start with your second best story instead of your best story. For years, people have taught that you should get on stage and start with the best thing you have. Unfortunately, then your speech goes like this for the rest of the time, potentially. Don't do that. Figure out your best speech story and put it at the end. And you could start with your second best story. Another thing I like to do is to start my presentation with a question. So I might come out on stage and say something like, have you ever been to a concert where the artist didn't sing the song you came to hear? And everyone goes, oh yeah. And I go, who was it? And I start pointing and they go, oh, I remember when this happened. Now we're having a conversation. It's not just me doing a presentation. And so with the conversation, next thing I know, I can then give them my new story, which is how I went to a Billy Joel concert and he didn't play the Piano Man. What's fun about this is that that actually ties into something I can share later on if I want, or I can wrap the whole story up right then and there. Just depends on the direction I want to take the audience. But audience engagement through a question right up front, really smart way to start. Let's talk about 5 unique ideas to start your presentation. The first one would be, start with a question. When you ask that question, engages their mind, they start to think, oh, I should listen, or this is why this person's going to be interesting. It'll grab them right away, and then you have a greater chance of success. One of my favorite questions to start with is, why set a goal when you can make a promise? That's a provocative enough question that people are thinking, well, I like goals. Why is he not being nice about goals? In reality, I'm going to give them how the promise is going to be great for their lives. It's a great way to start. What's fun about that as well is that it kind of challenges their beliefs. It might make them think, well, I don't know if I'm even going to agree with this guy, and I'm okay with that. I want them to actually be critically thinking while I'm speaking instead of zoning out on their phones and not even listening at all. This one's a very unique suggestion, but the unexpected silence. If somebody's introduced to stage and they just walk out and stand there, and looking around. That's an interesting way to capture the room's attention because they either think this person forgot their line or they're about to say something really powerful. I love when I've tried this. It's risky though. Don't want to go too long. Don't want to stand there like you've forgotten everything you're about to say. Just look around silent and then deliver the line. It actually captures their energy in a great way. I'd also recommend the powerful visual. Yeah, you know what's cool about that is if you were to show a cool thing on the screen, a picture or some kind of illustration, that will really engage the people, especially if it's a fact or figure. What I love nowadays is that ChatGPT actually allows us to create any image we want, essentially. And so you could create something really powerful that people are like, whoa, what is that? And that would get their attention so that then they're like, what's he about to say? You can lean into talking about that imagery. Another great way to start is the engaging story. Now we've talked about starting with maybe your second best story, but let's just talk about the engaging story. If I'm speaking to a group of educators versus a bunch of students, I'm going to start different with those types of audiences. If I start with children and I'm in front of a bunch of kids, I'm going to talk about being the weird kid on the bus. When I was a kid as well. Then I go into my silly voices of like, when I was 5 years old, this is what happened. And I'll have to kind of tee them up so they understand that I'm doing a character of me when I was little, not making fun of anyone there. And then I go into a whole story about discovering my nose wiggle and my faces and all these things. And the kids are like, ah, and they love it. That's an engaging story. The other way that I do it with educators, if I started with that story of my faces and all that stuff for educators, or a corporate audience, it would be very confusing. They would be like, this makes no sense. However, this is my number one bit or story, if you will. And so that's why I save it for the end for a majority of my audiences. With a corporate audience or education audience, I'll start generally with a story about how my grandma was an educator, or how all of us are leaders and this is a way that we can lead. An engaging story right up front so that they go, I'm going to lean into this, and then later I'll share the funny kid story that works so well for kids up front. And then you could start with the startling statistic. One of my buddies, his name is John Cilio. John speaks about cybersecurity, and he actually comes on stage and he freaks everyone out right away. So if you want to give a startling statistic, this will freak the audience out to be with you the whole time. He comes out on stage and he goes, "Did you know that within 3 clicks, I can take away your identity?" And then all of a sudden everyone's like, "What?" And he goes, "Let's talk to this lady right here." And he starts talking to somebody he's done research on, and it freaks the whole audience out just because he went to her Facebook or LinkedIn or somewhere on Google and found out about her. The whole audience then is with him from the very beginning. Check out Cilio.com. You'll get a kick out of his amazing presentation to keep you safe online. So let's talk about implementing these ideas. When you customize your introduction in terms of the first things you say on stage, like I shared with coming in from another place and talking about their situation there and other types of ways, that's one thing, but I also did rehearse that. I ran through it in my mind. I actually typed it on my phone as fast as I could to remember what I was going to say. And so rehearsing through it is great. If it's not a customizable intro and it's your normal intro, then hey, you can have that memorized and stand up on stage, but you really want to deliver that line well. At least the first few lines, you don't want to stumble, don't want to stutter too much. Make sure that you're really nailing those lines so that then they'll be with you and they'll say, "This is a competent, great speaker I'm about to hear." What I'd also recommend is recording yourself saying it. Record yourself on video. Record it on your phone, on a voice memo. Those things are powerful tools to be able to listen back and say, is this the kind of speech I want to hear? Is this a good way to start? Maybe you can change your voice inflection and ask more of a question, or you could say it as a statement. One of the best ways to figure out the way to start your speech is through feedback. Ask the right people though. Don't ask anybody. Ask somebody you trust. Ask multiple people. Get a couple of good opinions. Unfortunately, a lot of the people we ask will usually say, "Oh, you got to change it, scrap this, do this," even if you know that it kind of works. So don't just listen to anybody. Listen to somebody who knows what they're doing, a coach, a speaker, a professional speaker, but mostly a friend who cares about your success. So what I'd like you to do is to engage with me here, if you will. Put it in the comments what I've missed or what your favorite piece of introducing and presenting is. Whether you like to do a question or some audience engagement, telling your second best story or even your best. I would love for you to engage with me here and put in the comments what you think is the best way to start a speech. That way you and I can engage with each other because I respond to every single comment and I'm excited to engage with you here on this channel. Also, hey, like and subscribe while you're at it. Thanks for joining me today and good luck on your next speech.